Hello, and welcome to an introduction to First. I am Franny from Team 1711, competing in the First in Michigan District. Thanks to Team IMC 4191, this we are bringing you the First Parts to Practice series in English. So, what is First? First is a global organization for inspiration and recognition of science and technology that intends to be the starting point to the engineering journey and a chance to explore the STEM world. Okay, so let's get started. Like I said, FIRST intends to be the starting point on the engineering pathway, and that can look very different depending on what level of FIRST you start in. So the way FIRST is designed, it's split up into three different competitions, each one increasing in difficulty as you go up. So you start with FIRST Lego League, very smaller robots. It's in a partnership with Lego, so it's simpler, it's more approachable, but you still learn a lot of skills. It's definitely the largest age range, so it appeals to a bunch of people, and it's definitely the easiest one to start in. It's very simple, but it's generally a very great way to learn skills. It's also the simplicity and approachability is what makes it ideal for a lot of educators because it can be easily implemented into classrooms, as the goal of FIRST is to inspire engineering and teach students the skills they need to work in STEM and to succeed in the engineering world. That's kind of FIRST's greater goal. It's not just have kids build robots, it's robots building kids, as they like to say. But next on that ladder is FIRST Tech Challenge, FTC. And this is more, it's kind of in between FIRST Lego League and FIRST Robotics Competition, generally for middle schoolers and high schoolers here in the United States. And it's more mechanically challenging than FLL, but not as much as FRC. So it's definitely kind of that middle of the road, but it's still, you learn some great skills. And then after that, it's First Robotics Competition, FRC. That's kind of the biggest level of competition. It was the first one put out by First, and it's definitely the most mechanically challenging and complex, but that gives you the opportunity to really challenge yourself and build some real world engineering skills. So you're going to use a lot of manufacturing processes in here. You're going to learn new ways to design things. It's really great. It's really fun, and it actually creates a really big community because it groups together a bunch of people. This includes FTC and FLL, a bunch of people who are here to learn engineering skills and to make the world a better place. To be a little more specific, FLL was designed for the age range of 4 to 16. A lot of times here in the United States, it caps out around elementary school, so around 10, 11, 12 years old, but older students can still compete in it, but this is generally because they are the least complex and easiest for students to handle. Ages 12 to 16, 18 are generally the ages for the first tech challenge because it, again, gets a little more complex, so older kids can generally handle it more, while FRC is primarily just high school students. There is actually a local team in our area that is mostly middle schoolers, which is really cool. But generally, that's how it's built up. And because First wants to cater to all skill ranges, all age ranges, so that's why there's so many different competitions and so many different skills you can learn. Because again, First philosophy is to build up kids using robots. So teach them the skills, teach them how to be a good person, teach them how to be graciously professional, all the so now let's get into what FLL is. This is kind of the initial stage of robotics. As you can see at the farthest left picture, the robots are generally very small. That's probably about a little bigger than my hand, but they give you Legos, so it's easy to put together. And you can make it as complex or simple as you like, but having it be Lego makes it a very approachable product because people do recognize Legos. They're a very well-known company. Most kids play with Legos, so it's really great that kids are able to use the skills they've learned playing with Legos and apply them to robotics. And another thing, FLL is a great way to learn coding because this FLL primarily offers block codes. And that's our second to the left picture. But block codes are great for those who want to learn how to code because it teaches them the general algorithmic thinking that is required to code later in Java or Python or any of the other languages, and puts it in a very simple and digestible format so you can see exactly where things go. And it's really colorful, so makes it a little more appealing for kids. But it's a really great starting point for learning how to program. And it's really important in FLL because in FLL, there is no driver period. It is just autonomous actions, which means every movement you have when you're actually playing the game, whatever it is pre-programmed. So, small field of basic tasks. This year, the game I believe is called Unearthed, and the robots have a series of tasks they can or may choose or may not to choose to perform. So, they'll design a mechanism designed to accomplish maybe 1, 2 tasks, and they can change it out throughout the game, but they have to come back to a certain part of the field. And what makes things like FLL really good for schools that, as you can see, the robots are generally pretty small, but so are the fields. So a school can get a field and they can have a bunch of teams participating because they are generally smaller teams. But it makes it great because the kits aren't as expensive. They're small, easy to keep, much simpler, makes them a great choice for education. And while I've talked about how the robots are very simple, FLL can still be very complex. Like I said, it's as complex or as simple as you make it. So it can get very competitive, especially at the world's level. But you choose where to start first based on what appeals to you the most. And a fundamental part of FLL is creativity and teamwork. It's where you learn how to work on a team. You're going to build a robot that has to solve that can or cannot solve a bunch of different tasks. And you have to work together to accomplish that. So one person may be the programmer, one person may be the builder, one person, it can be whatever you want it to be. But one of the central values of FLL is creativity and teamwork. Let's talk about FLL robots. So these robots are, as you can see, are a little simpler in structure, and the parts are made by Lego, so they're pretty easy to access and they're pretty easy to put together. So you're going to have sensors, you're going to have motors, and you're going to have, like, we call it the robot brain, which is that yellow block on top. But these are all made by Lego, so they're pretty easy to access and pretty easy to put together. So you build a lot of different mechanisms for FLL because the games generally give you a wide variety of tasks and you can choose to make different mechanisms to accomplish them. And another cool thing about FLL is that all the movements in the game are pre-programmed, so there's no driver period, it's just programming. I think this is really cool because it not only makes you a better programmer, but helps you learn how to think through things step by step, how to optimize efficiency, and making sure that everything is going where it's supposed to go. But yeah, generally, it's pretty cool. It's still a rigorous program, even though I've said it is a little simpler mechanical wise. But there's still a lot of competition. There's still strategy to be done, and you still have to build a robot that accomplishes the tasks. But generally, FL robots package it up in a way that it's more approachable to especially younger students and to schools who may not be able to keep giant robots everywhere because they are pretty small. Okay, so FTC kind of jumps up a level in mechanical challenge. As you can see in the leftmost image, you have a lot of metal parts, you have different motors, different sensors, and it's a little more technically complex, but generally a lot of FTC parts you'll get extrusions and you can kind of put them together still, but that being said, it is still more mechanically challenging than FTC. But a cool part about FTC is your programming abilities are actually expanded. So while you can still use block code, you can also use Java, which is really good for industry if you want to go work as a programmer, if you want to work as an engineer. Java is a great language to know. It is widely applicable and you can do a lot with it. And if you don't want to, that's okay. You can also use block, but I would recommend using Java because it is a great skill to know in the real world, even if AI is teaching people how to program now. But even then, being said, even though it's more challenging than FLL, it's still widely accessible. The fields, as you can see on the second to right image, they're larger, but they're not huge, which is really nice because while a lot of schools don't have the space for a giant robotics field, so with FTC and FLL, they can still fit it in, but it is bigger. The robots are bigger and more complex. But a lot of what the FTC game focuses on are mechanical design and control, because in this game, it's not all autonomous. There is an autonomous period, but there's also a human driver period, or we call it the teleop period. So it's really important to choose your driver, practice driving, making sure you're able to control your robot while it's on the field so you can score as many points as possible. Let's talk about the robots you see competing in FTC. So Generally, you have a lot of metal parts now. It's no longer snap and put together pieces like Legos. So they're going to be a little more mechanically complex. You're going to see multiple mechanisms on one robot, maybe intaking, indexing, shooting, grabbing, lifting, lots of options, lots of opportunity, and it's a little more complex, but now you're going to be throwing in more motors, you're going to be throwing in sensors, encoders. The tech is going to be a little more challenging, but that is one of the things that makes FTC very appealing. And FTC is a really great introduction to electronics. Electronics are often one of the most difficult parts of robotics for people to learn. And the FTC electronics actually make it very approachable. They're very simple, and it's a really good way to prepare for things like FRC or a degree you're pursuing in university. So now you start to build a little more of those skills, and it's a really great middle of the road between the simple approachable nature of FLL robots and the hard industry robots you see in FRC. Similarly to the FLL games, FTC games also have a pre-programmed autonomous period, but they also have a driver period. So you have to think now about how do you design your robot to be able to be controlled by a driver while it's on the field? How do you make that easier? How do you make your robot more efficient? So generally a little more complex, but it's still a great way to learn skills just like FLL is. Now we have reached the top of the first food chain, the first robotics competition. This is the next step up from FLL. The robots get a lot bigger, a lot more powerful, and a lot more complex. So to the farthest left image, that was our robot from last year. These robots generally weigh over 100 pounds, and you often have to manufacture them using a lot of industrial processes. But that's really great because it really shows you how it works in industry, how you're going to be making parts, how you're going to be building things. There's a lot of custom parts in FRC, and you have to basically build it from the ground up. There's a lot of freedom in your design, but generally your robots are going to be very large, very powerful, and very complex. You're going to often see multiple different mechanisms on one robot, either to handle one game piece very efficiently or be able to tackle multiple at the same time. They're very complex, they're very fun. But another cool thing about FRC is that the software also gets more complex. I know our team uses Java for our programming, but there are more options. So you can learn different languages that'll help prepare you for industry. Like I said, our team uses Java like you can use an FTC. So that's why it's a great way to prepare for both the industry and other places for university. But these robots are very complex because this field is very big. They have to be fast and they have to handle because there are 3 robots playing 3 robots. So that's 6 robots in total on one field. So it gets very fast, it gets very intense. So robots have to be able to handle the stress of competition, and that's why we have to build them to be so large and powerful. One of my favorite parts about FRC is how much strategy plays a role. Since you're competing with 2 other robots against another alliance of 3 robots, strategies become very important. So even if your robot isn't the best at scoring, if you play your strategies right, you can end up in a very good position. So it's a lot of times when teams are designing their robots, when the game is revealed, they are thinking about what is the strategy going to look like at their district championships? What is it going to look like at the world championships? And it plays a very big role into how the FRC season is conducted. But teamwork is also a very large part of the first robotics competition. Generally, from what I've seen, FLL and FTC teams tend to be smaller, not as many kids, but FRC teams can be huge. They can have anywhere from like 5 to as many as 100 students on them. So everyone has to learn how to work together. A lot of times people specialize in different skills. So you'll have a certain group of people doing electrical, a certain group of people doing programming, certain people doing design. So everyone has a role and everyone has the opportunity to learn a bunch of skills and work together to build these really, really cool machines. So let's talk about FRC robots. As I said, they're kind of meant to model industry. So you're going to see a lot of custom design parts, and you're going to see a lot of big, strong motors, strong machines. So for example, one of the most common type of motors used in FIRST are Krakens or Neos, and these motors are very fast, they're very powerful. There's one under that big white tube you see on the robot down there. But generally, robots can have sometimes like 20 motors. For example, if you use Swerve Drive, which is one of the most common drive bases now in FIRST robotics, that's 8 motors alone. So you use a lot of different machinery and a lot of different electronics on FRC robots. You can use a wide variety of sensors like beam brake sensors, and there's just a lot of opportunity and a lot of creative freedom you can take. So generally, while most robots will have the same function or purpose, their designs will be wildly different, and it's really cool to see because most teams are coming with their own custom parts. They're designing and manufacturing those parts, and they're putting it on their robot, and each robot is unique in some way. So a lot of those parts you see on that robot there, we manufacture ourselves. We design them to fit the needs that we had for our robot. And a great thing about FRC robots is that there's, like FTC, you have multiple complex subsystems on one robot. So one subsystem might intake the game piece, one might take it out of the robot, one might index it, one might shoot it. It all depends on what the game is, but robots are designed around those purposes. And to be the most efficient, you generally have to have more than one subsystem. But it's really important to prepare for that because that is a big part of the engineering industry, is to be able to be efficient and to handle multiple functions at once. And then similar to FTC, there's a pre-programmed and driver segment of FRC matches. So like I said, you'll be on an alliance of 3 playing against another alliance of 3. So drivers have to be really good. They have to be able to prepare for defense from the other side. They have to score quickly, and they have to maneuver these giant machines around a lot of different obstacles. But there is also an autonomous section. And something great about the IC with FRC robots is even when it's not the autonomous period and the robot's not fully autonomous, a lot of teams use these little barcode like things called April tags on the field to help them. Like they can push a button and it's an autonomous function that'll score a game piece, and that adds a whole other level of complexity. But the result of all that complexity and all that extra challenge added is you get to see some really cool machines that do a lot of really cool things and are able to be fast and efficient at it. I hope you enjoyed that introduction to generally the structure of FIRST. FIRST as an organization is very large. It's present in a lot of different countries, so they have a lot of reach. But throughout the series, FIRST Parts to Practice, you're going to hear about the FIRST values, you're going to hear about volunteering opportunities, you're going to hear more about FTC, FLL, and FRC. So if you want to know more about robotics, I would recommend keep watching the series. It's a really cool place. I love my team. I'm currently on our media sub-team as well as our electrical sub-team. So you have so many opportunities to learn so many different types of skills. And a lot of people expect robotics teams to be fully in on just the tech side, but it's so much more than that. Teams have to market themselves. They have to talk to other people. So there's a wide variety of skills that you can learn from FIRST that'll really prepare you for the real world and prepare you to go out there and be successful young people. And that's the goal of FIRST. I hope you enjoyed this, and if you want to hear more about robotics, check out the rest of the FIRST Parts to Practice series. I'm Franny from Team 1711. Thank you for watching this video.